Additionally, a couple of years ago, I read about the psychological theories of adult cognitive development by the psychologist Robert Kegan in the 90s, and he's continued to develop these through the years. Just became so fascinated about the applicability of this. I'm going to show you his one of his 2 books on the subject, and this is one that I definitely recommend as being, if you don't want to read the more academic version, this is the one that concerns itself with the transition between stage 3 and stage 4, which I'm going to talk about, and how important that is. That's this book, In Over Our Heads, The Mental Demands of Modern Life. Here's a brief overview before I get into the other slides. Just a brief overview is that, let's say, stage 3, stage 4, stage 5. Now, in stages 1 and 2, typically infancy, childhood through adolescence. But as far as adult cognitive development, you gain the ability to take the perspective during adolescence and during your teenage years, typically, if it tracks, of being able to take the perspective of another person. Now, what has happened up until that point is that you were your sensations, and then you became your interests. You're like, oh, I have a bunch of enduring things about me. That's what I am, and I really have sensations. Each one of these transitions is going to be changing what you are and what you have. What you are now becomes something that you merely have. You stand outside of it. We'll look at it from this side. So from stage 3, where you can take the perspective of other people pretty firmly, you've got that handle, to stage 4, in the stage 4 systematic mode, you start to see the relationships between relationships. A relationship of relationships is a social system. And in the way of relating to yourself, you now have relationships. You are your systems. Now, systems, not only social systems, but systems of justification. Because, therefore. And a whole series of, like, usually grounding out if you're Augustine to, like, God or something. This because of this, because of this, because of this, because of this, because of, I don't know, Soviet communism or the cosmic absolute or fill in the blank, but you've become a system. So now you have principles, projects, and commitments. Depending on where you are in the world, the timetable for when this typically is going to happen, assuming that it ever happens at all, is 20s to 40s. Sometimes it happens during the 40s. I've had some people report that they found that in Silicon Valley, there's an unusually large number of stage 4s, like hitting that during the college years. And ideally, a lot of people would go through some kind of training program, they go through university, whatever it may be, or they begin their career, and it would transform them into a self-authored person. Self-authored because here, you are your relationships. Whether I'm a good person and what kind of person I am, who I am, what people think of me. My church, my country, my family, whatever I didn't choose, I was born into it, and I am a mom, I am a son, I am a Christian, whatever the thing may be. But now you can self-author in stage 4. In stage 4, you have an enduring set of principles, projects, and commitments. You start to also relate to other people in terms of their principles, projects, commitments. You're making choices. I choose to be within this. So it's self-authored because you have a set of internal justifications. Other people are like, I don't like you. You're like, see, that's an interesting data point. You know? So now you have your, okay, I get that, and that's important, sir. Thank you for your vote. Swipe right again next time. But I have my own things inside myself where I can say, you know what, I now realize there is a therefore and there is a because, and I can judge myself. This starts to get really like crystallized, where you have a very firm, crystallized, inflexible identity. And this, right back into the last talk, I'm really looking forward to talking to Hazard about this more, about, you know, this is the only way that I am. And I just don't like beers. And so I'm not going to learn about the different kinds of beers. Again, the kinds of beers structure. There's a whole system to it. In the self-transforming mind, you start to relate a kind of person who you can be to another kind of person who you can be. And this kind likes beers. This kind can talk to, I talked to a Christian pastor on the airplane on the way here, and I managed to have a successful conversation, which I could go into more detail about later. But like, you're like, okay, I'm still being me, but I know how to speak the language. You have multiple frontas that you can speak, and multiple ways that are adapted to whatever the situation may call for. Which person do I need to be in such and such a situation? Okay, I know how to switch to that mode. There is not the one true final way to think, feel, speak, act, and be. Because now it's contextual based on whatever it is that you actually need. Self-transforming. Next slide.
Maybe your next slider.
Well,
Well, I'm going to be going back and forth, but yeah, sometimes I'll just ask you to click it. So switchbacks. You're in an inner tube, and everybody's on an inner tube, and you have stage 3, stage 4, stage 5. Wow, my stage is really working. My way of relating to other people in like a communal, let's say stage 3. You're a teenager, you're getting into social groups, you're bonding with your social groups, you're making sure that you're liked by your social groups, you're making sure to like their music, etc. Right? It functions. It functions for you. You're going smoothly down the current. All right, this works. The problem is that as soon as you need to go stage 4, it feels as if you're going backward. At every stage transition, including 1, 2, the stage transitions are painful points in life often. It's often reported. Some people have it smoother than others. But you get into these switchback pools where you're like, I don't want to go backward. This is really working for me. I want it to work, but it starts to break down because you realize the places where, if I'm going to actually be on a voting body of a board of directors, actually they need me to not constantly be in stage 3, or whatever the challenges may be. You've got your one true system, and you're like, you know what, man alive, I've just realized Soviet communism is the answer to every single thing in the world. I mean, I'm picking that out because we can laugh at it because we're not in Soviet Russia, but it could be anything. I got my way. If only I just apply a probability number to every single thing that I do, whatever it may be. But the point is that here you can still use probability numbers. But up until here, you're like, uh-oh, man, this is called stage 4.5. And I'll go into this more later, how this corresponds to pre-modern villages, which can coordinate themselves perfectly well at stage 3. Modernism, postmodernism, metamodernism, where the switchback is super painful. You go around and around in these little whirlpools that people have, and you're not good at this yet. Yeah, Lou.
can I put like a quick description of stages 1 through 5? Or is that not?
Didn't we just?
Wait, yeah, but just like a quick kind of like reminding, because it's just a little bit difficult to keep everything in memory.
Absolutely. So in the stage 3 communal mode, you are.
What about 1 and 2?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Well, we can go back to that. All right, you're an infant. You're like, I'm having sensations. I am my sensations. I feel hungry. Feed me, etc., etc. All right, now you have your sensations. You aren't your sensations at stage 2. Now you are your Pokemon cards. You are your list of every single fact about dinosaurs.
Wait, so you become your possessions, or
The way that you feed your interests,
Okay.
your enduring needs, dispositions, preferences, interests. I'm interested in these things. You start to notice things about yourself in a simplistic way. And I love Hazard's talk. Like, you start to crystallize, you start to become that, where really, if you, it takes, there's still work to be done in later stages. You still have those capacities, but now you need to learn that you can like beer. You actually still can. You aren't just the things that you formed here and boom, okay, I'm not interested in this, I am interested in that. Later in the stages, you actually can continue to you're not making them yourself anymore. You know what, if I want to like beer, I can, and I can learn how to like it.
So that's stage 2, and then stage 3 would be like, oh, I'm at a party, high school party, I don't like it, but everyone else is drinking.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
So now you have your preferences,
Right.
but you are your relationships. School
Right.
chums being the prototype of the mode. School chums are prototype, and you really, like, you can see this in teens, like they really lean into it. Who am I? Well, I'm the friend who hangs out at that lunch table.
Right.
So now the problem with having something that is you is that you don't have it. It has you. It has you.
Right. Because if you lose that thing, what are you?
What are
We see
you?
that
You-
now. Midlife crises, or
Absolutely.
at the melancholy of finishing a book, or
If I'm not a Christian
achieving a
pastor,
goal.
what am I?
Yeah.
Serious, you see that. If I'm not X, what am I? And that's what the difference, now all of a sudden it's just something you have, is actually really awesome. So you are your relationships, the subject, and that becomes object. You are your systems of principles, projects, and commitments. You are your structure of justifications about, because I think this, therefore that, therefore that, therefore that, therefore that, therefore, capital R reason. Even that, all of these things are good things, which then kind of essentialize themselves into becoming who you are in a damaging way where you can't think flexibly anymore. At each of these stages, you take the capacity to keep that capacity, but step outside it. And now look at it from the outside. So now you're outside of your systems and you can choose between them, meaning making itself is what you are. Because each of those systems are constructing, okay, I'm in a situation, what does the situation mean? This means that it is a thing I can pick up, and I'm thirsty, so I'm going to drink more of my presentation. So meaning making itself becomes something you can stand outside of. I used that framework or that way of being, and I see why, but you know what? I'm in a different scenario today than I was then. Now you can pick and choose between which self to be, in a sense. Is there a stage 6? Piaget and Kegan are like, maybe, but find one. Find one who we could administer the subject-object interview to. Well, yeah.
I think in the Deutschen sense, I feel like you could have stage 6 be I am what I could be, or it's like I am potentiality. Right? So that's what optimism would lead to. It's like I am universal changer.
And that, yeah, a universal changer, maybe a constructor. I don't really know the terminology.
Yeah.
But far be it from me, since I am not a psychologist or an expert in the subject, and Kegan himself is, and is like, absolutely, let's come up with stage 6 as soon as we can do literally anything about it. They have the subject where they can barely find, they don't really typically find a lot of stage 5s.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you can't really find a lot of stage 5s, maybe we're not ready to really concretely talk about stage 6 in anything other than just blow the smoke up our own ass. I don't know.
Sorry, are you trying to talk? Yeah, Jake wants to say.
Sorry, I was just saying really quickly to the question about whether the sort of Deutschian version would involve the subject being the universal change-making conjecture or whatever, or constructor or whatever. That does seem pretty analogous to what's being referred to by stage 5 here, which is like if even the principles by which you reason are subject to change and different applications and problem solving, the identity you've assumed in stage 5 is that it's the one who stands outside those things and can apply them to certain circumstances. So like the faculty of meaning making is playing a similar role here to the faculty of reasoning in a Deutschian frame, I think.
And vocabulary could be different because it could simply be what meaning making is trying to express.
So meaning making means something more than what Deutschian means by reasoning, but I think it also means that. Yeah.
By the way, Jake is the resident, like he knows, like, so this stuff is kind of like meta-rationalist, and then there's the Deutschian critical rationalism, and Jake knows, is like the only one who knows both of them, I think.
All right, so you have relation. Yes, and I appreciate that. But moving on, you've got the symmetrical and structured relationships. You've got the asymmetrical with formal roles. Like I'm gonna get down into a more concrete example here. Okay, well, how do relationships work, for example? And you've got the metasystematic. Again, so right here, we get the word metasystematic is introduced into the doc, where you, in the communal mode, everything is just symmetrical and unstructured, and you're kind of like unlimitedly responsible for your school chums or your kids or your church or your hackerspace or your science fiction convention. Guilty as charged, right? Helium hand, no. You can't possibly be unilateral. There has to be a structured role. And one of the things that was so useful to me is seeing in the past like 20, 25 years of getting involved in volunteer organizations, how it gradually had to steer me through the uncomfortable waters of those switchbacks, and you know what, you've got to become systematic. There are asymmetrical formal roles, and the point of formal asymmetrical roles is it's super labor saving if you can just have a huge binder full of flowcharts, and which is a system, and it's asymmetrical in that I don't have to do that thing for you that you had to do for me. For example, you can't say let me find my ping pong table. Yes. Okay. You can't just say something came up if you're stage 4. Stage 3 will say, oh, something came up. I knew I was going to give a slide presentation about Kegan stage, but I'm sorry, but I had to do this other thing for somebody else because they were crying. The emotions were so big. And in stage 4, I am my emotions. Whoever cries hardest wins. I mean, we laugh and it is funny, but I've been through too many board meetings in which this person should not be part of a formal voting body. If the thing that they are voting on is like whoever is crying the hardest in the meeting.
Yeah, there's a thing that happens in communities fairly often when some drama comes up. Yeah, the person with the most emotion they'll display tends to get the most, for lack of a better word, sympathy and attention for good reasons. But also, not everyone displays their emotions the same way. Doesn't mean they're not feeling them. And so when people are only focusing on the people who are the most emotive in an outward way, it can cause a lot of
So Kegan talks about that, and also David Chapman in his experiences in Buddhist communities. That and I was like, I'm right there with you. To make every single person feel heard, which is often a very important part of the stage 3 communal organizational structure, expands to take up 100% of the time at the meeting. Whereas a vote is a system. We're finding out the will of the group through everybody raise your hand, yes or no, is a very simple, voting is a systematic thing. So the ping pong is the ping pong relationship where the last person I talked to, I said yes to. And then the person after that, I said yes to them as well. And then I go back to the first person and I say, but my thing, okay, I said yes again. Whichever person you're standing in front of at stage 3, you're likely to just say yes to preserve the relationship, because there's no underlying formal system where you have to be able to say there is some reason. It's asymmetrical. There is some formal structure where I agreed to that before, and that's why I'm not going to do this thing, even though it is in and of itself more important, or regardless of whether it is, because there was an agreement. So that, again, is a formal asymmetrical structured thing. You also see, I got this off Twitter. I did not make this. But a lot of empaths. I am an empath. Sometimes I can tell people are feeling simply by deciding how I think they feel in my own mind and instantly believe. What you see at stage 4 is the ability to stop being flooded by other people's emotions as much. Where you see it, you don't lose any capacities you had in previous stages, but you're not flooded by their feelings where now you are feeling that too. You are them, you are the relationship. Where now you can say, yes, that's definitely something we dealt with, let's do something about it, but after we finish at the Department of Motor Vehicles, maybe at home, you know. So there is a structure to how things are gone through. And metasystematic relationships are you're able to interact with different people in different ways based on, you know what, the system we had wasn't working. One of the ways that you apply principles is that you're going to say, okay, in our organization, we're going to have a certain set of rules. We're going to apply those rules even-handedly without fear or favor. And later, after the meeting, you're like, that went terrible. The rules are wrong. Situation has changed. Circumstances have changed. Let's now have a new vote to change the rules. So metasystematic is the way to actually question your own systems based on appropriateness to your circumstances you find yourself in. Whereas You have compassion, you have consensus in the communal mode. You have procedural justice, the even-handed application of policy. People have structured roles where there are certain responsibilities, and this science fiction convention is too complicated for everybody to have every job, right? So there comes a point where you say, that's not making it in the schedule book because there was a deadline and I told you what it was. And the phrase that I hear is, your failure to plan does not constitute a crisis on my part, which is not something you're cognitively able to say at stage 3. Not my problem is a stage 4 thinking. It's not stage 3 thinking. And this is the funny point where you get to the point where every stage here looks at the next stage and mistakes it for the previous stage. Yes,
A
please.
libertarian stage 4.
Let me answer it this way. Are X system stage 4? They can be. They 100% can be. Is Matt Arnold's system stage 4? Can be. Is Matt Arnold practicing it that way? Please tell me if I do. Please tell me if I do. But I mean, libertarianism is, I will be very straightforward and to the point. I have known more extremely, I don't live in Soviet Russia. And if I did, that would be my main experience of the way that Alexander Solzhenitsyn described Soviet communism as like, everybody thinks that this has to do with every single topic they've ever experienced in life. My background, because I am so close to libertarianism myself, has surrounded me with so many libertarians that statistically, I have been exposed to more stage 4 libertarians than most people. It's a fact about me, not a fact about libertarians. And if you say that, I think you're better able to say that at stage 5. This now leads to your next question. Am I stage 5? Robert Kegan said in a podcast interview that if you are asking yourself, I want to be stage 5 to be one of the cool people, you're stage 3. If you are asking yourself, I want to be stage 5 in order to have the one true correct way, you're stage 4. Finally, I have made it. I have made it. The cosmic ordering principle opened up the clouds. The eternal structure of the universe beamed down stage 5 upon me. That is stage 4. So this actually gets right into how societies are built, which is that you were really able to successfully organize a village with everybody there at stage 3, and it actually worked out okay. Once you get into economies of scale, things start to break down unless people have a structured formal role, where, you know, if individuals frequently fail to do their specific routine tasks, nothing you get done. And then we immediately get into, everybody is like, look, the system is what's keeping this afloat, which is true. I mean, they're not wrong. The system's also causing all the problems. I mean, I don't care which society you want to look at. There's no, oh, you know what? Yeah, they don't have that problem with that society. No matter which one it is, you've got to meta-rationally step back and say, okay, we have an awesome system. We use voting. Here was our voting system, or whatever it may be. We had this system of distributing like a warehouse infrastructure, whatever it may be. Well, if things change the system. And that is more of the meta-rational approach to society, what could be called the fluid mode. Let's talk about epistemology for a second. Woo! Sorry about the abrupt breaks, but I mean, driven by the system of the chart. It has columns, it has rows. You know, therefore, that is the order in which I should tell you things. So you can put yourself in the shoes of another person. You can take the perspective of a structured social system. I mean, I started to find after a while, I'm like, I don't even like the people in the hacker space. I just love the hacker space. I love it so much. You know what I mean? Where you're like, this system is creating this bounty for me. I mean, the reality is the people really are. And I would, at the risk of overstepping and making too strong of a case, it could be that you need to take not only take children seriously, but take stage 3 seriously, which I didn't for a long time. And stage 3, like I looked at them and I'm like, they're doing so much work. How can we keep them here? And I'd say to the other stage 4 people, look, you're right. I'm not saying you're wrong. But the way you talked to them in that meeting means that I'm going to be doing a ton of work when this thing comes and they're not there because they resigned because of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So now the system itself is like, all right, how can we keep people at every stage, giving them something to do, but being a developmental organization? What Kegan calls a developmental organization is one in which you discourage certain things and you encourage certain things based on where they are on the switchback. So it's really going to depend how mad you are at somebody, whether they're here or whether they're here, right? Kegan had a social worker friend, and she had a client of her social work who was like 18 to 22 age range, really like to be in stage 2. It was really like to be in stage 2, but he was in and out of jail, in and out of juvie, and saying to her, you know what, I was out with my friends and I was just really focused on, we were just all, doing our stuff, and we did some bad roll. And then we were going to steal these motorcycles. And I didn't steal one because you keep telling me to be like, in the future, what's going to happen to me if I do. And Robert Kegan was like, congratulate him. He was stuck here for too long and he's getting here every once in a while. He's getting here, he's getting here, he's getting here. Okay. Firm that up. This is the moment for encouragement, where you're not yelling at him that he's not here, where you have systems of ethics. He's putting himself into he's taking the perspective of his future self. All right, that's a start. Taking his perspective, taking of his future self, it's a start. Work with what you've got, is his point. Now, I'm not saying organizationally, definitely put people who are glad they didn't steal motorcycles into your organization. But to be a developmental organization, you could think about, how do we structure this so that we're like, you need to be in a certain role in the organization, but you need to, we discourage and encourage different things for the stage that you're in, where we know which stage we're trying to get you into. And that's actually thinking about that, because not everyone is the same. Depending on whether you apply the.
Question back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. If you're one person, say you're a person who is stage 5, you alluded to people who are stage 3 can be successful at doing things that maybe someone who's stage 5 would not. Can one person like compartmentalize and be stage 3 in certain senses? Like there's a distance there, and
Yeah.
be stage 4 in others and be stage 5 in others.
Yeah, and I see what you're asking, but it's not about so much losing the capacities that you had at previous stages.
Okay.
You're just seen differently by them now.
Right.
In fact, I should have finished talking about the way that when you see, there was a question that actually was going to go to that. It's not that you've lost the capacity for warmth,
Okay.
and become a robot at stage 4. You've seen that way. You haven't. So everybody at stage 3 generally tends to see everyone at stage 4 as stage 2 selfishness. Remember the scene in The Matrix? The window washing scene? Neo's being chewed out by his boss. Excuse me, Mr. Anderson's being chewed out by his boss. He's got the squeaky. The window washers. This whole scene, stage 3. The only reason you could possibly have a bunch of formal roles is capitalism. You are trying to selfishly earn a profit on the backs of like whatever it may be. That's one way to frame how bad stage 4 people are, that they're stage 2 selfishness. There are many ways to do so. You're unchristian. Whatever it may be, they're like, you're being mean. You're not trying to create communal harmony within the group, which is the compassion and the consensus of the stage 3. Because you're not doing that, you must be in stage 2 selfishness. It's the only possible motive you could have for structuring things and saying words like, it's not my problem.
I think Jake has been.
Yeah, James.
I have a question actually. This is something I've been wondering about. I'd be curious, Matt, if this is how you see it too. So even though in principle at each stage there's one supposed to transcend and include the other, right? You're not supposed to lose stage 3 faculties when you go to stage 4, etc. Just in thinking about how this relates to the Chapman eternalism nihilism stuff, do you think that one can like eternalize stage 4 and in so doing blind oneself to stage 3 faculties? So for example, like there are all these ways in which in modernity, we've given up on very functional things that pre-modern society had. Ritual would be one example, say, because we've lost a sense of why they might be functional in virtue of eternalizing stage 4. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a matter of perspective, because what Kegan would say to that is that it's not that you can't, it's that you now have the power to choose to amputate entire parts of the human experience from yourself, should you want to. No, seriously. And that's like Kegan puts it, like, okay, at stage 2, you were blind and oblivious to how you were sprawling in the subway and taking up too much room from other people near you. Now you choose to sprawl in the subway for some
Right. You blind yourself. Yeah.
right? Whatever it may be. So it's you have the capacity instead of the blindness. Does that make sense? You're like,
Yeah, exactly. So it's like in stage 2, you're not self-deceiving yourself when you lack stage 3 capacities. In stage 4, if you lack stage 3 capacities, you're self-blinding. It's a species of self-deception.
Yeah, like or it could just be you realize the problems you had at that switchback and you're not going back to that. Right? So it is entirely possible it's entirely possible to do that, but it is a matter of there is the power to choose that there wasn't before. So anyone in stage 4 typically sees somebody at stage 5 as some kind of woo. Stage 3 woo, stage 3 spiritualism, stage 3 like communal style, you've become flooded by the people's feelings. So they're usually, a lot of stage 4 people will usually look at anybody stage 5 and think, is this like fortune telling? Is this mysticism? It might look like, no, it's not mysticism. It's the ability to adapt to whatever the circumstance calls for in a situation where there is no one true way. It's not the same thing as there is no one true way in stage 3, which is that, like, for social reasons, in stage 3, everybody's got to agree. So everybody's really the same. All religions since the dawn of time have expressed the same fundamental truth. No, that's just diplomatic. At stage 5, it's not just like for niceties and for politeness, let's just be diplomatic. At stage 5, it's actually, there's more of a completion where you're like, all right, now I see what you're getting at, and I see what you're getting at too, and I kind of see what you're getting at too, and I see what you're getting at too, but I also see that each of one of you disagrees on things that are actually really important and necessary, and that you value those things, and that is good that you value your differences. Let's say in the religions, each of the 7 major religious groups in the world has things about them that they are like, no, like, we don't agree about that. This is really important to me, and it's insulting at stage 3 when you're just like, oh, but you're all saying really the same thing, and they're like, no, we're not, you know. But at stage 5, you're like, I also see that each of you is addressing a different problem, an unrelated problem with its own unrelated solution. So there's an example.
Question.
Yes.
By that argument, wouldn't people in stage 5 view the potential people in stage 6 as stage 4s?
Very likely.
Is that why they can't find them?
I would love to ask Kegan that exact question. That exact question. There's also this thing of there's a certain.
I missed the question. What was the question? I couldn't hear it.
Jake, the question is that can people in stage 5 not find anyone to administer a subject-object interview and have them come out at stage 6 because they mistake them for stage 4?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should meet Kegan someday and I'll be
Stage
like,
6
gotcha.
We don't have a description for stage 6?
No,
Okay.
there isn't a framework. They're like, look, we've gone as far as we can go
Yeah.
with what we know.
Right.
The critical rationalists are all stage 6 secretly.
I was just gonna make the joke. Stage 6 rationals is like, you just go meta meaning making. It's just like meaning making, and from the central point of like taking all the meanings of all different things and finding your own.
I look forward to whatever book anyone in this room is about to write on the subject of taking it to the next stage. So systems, unfair but avoidable external impositions in which Neo's boss yells at him, and they have a like really annoying sound window clicking in the background. Stage 4 systems are rational necessities justified by principles that are supposedly ultimate and ground out in something, whether it be the cosmic absolute, Soviet communism, God, rationality with capital R. Stage 5, systems are nebulous and they are patterned. Those are words from David Chapman, which like I got the point of that in Kegan, but he framed it, that's that paragraph I took from the chat, where you see that systems constantly run up against limits, problems, obstacles. You're like, gotta switch to a different system for the situation. Because this binder full of flowcharts is a great binder, don't throw it out, but I need a different binder with a different set of flowcharts to improvise collaboratively with the situation that's now presenting to me that's not in this binder. So nebulosity and pattern are inherent in all systems and are therefore inseparable. That's a long story, but imagine a tube. The tube has two holes at the end, and you can't have a tube if there aren't holes at the end. But you also can't have holes if there isn't a tube. I don't like that metaphor either, but I can't think of a better one. All right. So the way that, we were talking about society, where pre-modern civilizations could work fine at stage 3, and then modernism had to work at stage 4. And then systems started to really break down as you found all the problems with whatever system somebody came up with that didn't solve for a lot of edge cases. And so but they were like, no, but it's the only one true right system that all people must have at all times in all circumstances. What are we going to do? And stage 4.5 is postmodernism, where the problem with criticizing postmodernism, for good reason, is that it's right. Where the systems all did in fact break down, and all systems inevitably do break down. And the idea is that you can't move backward. You can only move forward. Anybody who is like, I think the phrase on Twitter now is, you're LARPing being a trad, where you're pretending that you can go back to the choiceless mode of social organization, where in pre-modern times, you had never heard of alternative ways of making ethics or making meaning. You are not like that. You actually are making a choice. And you're probably making a choice that's a lot more systematic, even as a trad, than you like to admit. You can't. There's only forward. You can't go back. It's about how you can actually improvise when your systems, to be able to notice when the system you've constructed so far breaks down, criticize it, find a different way, modify it in some way. Not just to find the one true thing that's always going to be true for all people at all times, but like, and I keep being tempted throughout this talk to actually relate it to things other people have said, and then it turns out that I didn't understand the thing that was said, but like, what if it has to do with better technique? Well, what if it does? Now you're in a room, you're in space, you be aware of it, and you could be related. I don't know.
You got a prop right there.
I do. Unfortunately, working on finishing up this problem with my slide software, I missed this, and I'm very sorry because it was awesome, but I heard it from downstairs. Do I have enough time to talk about how this relates to?
You have 15
minutes.
I have 15 minutes. Okay. So one of the ways to advance that I found people advancing to stage 4 is through, this is a slight change of subject, Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. All of a sudden, here's just one example of a system. All of a sudden, you're relating to people with a system for conflict resolution. The conflict resolution is that you're splitting out needs, observations, and feelings. Oh, I'm having a feeling. Don't immediately lump it in with an observation as if they were the same thing. So instead of saying, you don't love me because you didn't wash the dishes, I observe that you didn't wash the dishes. I'm having these feelings. What do they have to do with my unmet needs? You can do two things. You can make a statement in the following formula. Oh, formula, stage 4. Stage 4 formalisms. The formula is, when I see this, I feel this. When I see that you didn't do the dishes. The other thing you do is transform it into a question in nonviolent communication. You're transforming it into, when you do the dishes, does it mean that you don't love me? I mean, like, go ahead and make it sound funny or stupid or whatever, but like, you're actually, go ahead and ask them, and it might turn out that the observations you made weren't due to some internal state that they had in their head.
Quick note, if you're trying to do nonviolent communication, I wouldn't recommend asking it like that.
No. Right? So if I'm in a very, if I'm struggling to maintain nonviolent communication, the point is, yeah, no, don't ask it like that. But the point is, you already were in their shoes.
I think your computer out of batteries.
I see.
That was so
Um,
dramatic. That it
when
just
you-
disappeared.
Do you want power?
Yes, thank you. When you were in there, when you were flooded by their feelings, your feelings and your observations were the same. They felt like they were the same. They were the same thing. It would be, oh, I had a feeling, therefore it must be, I feel accused, therefore they must be accusing me. Accused isn't a feeling, accused is a verb. I feel threatened, therefore they must be threatening me. Threaten is a verb. What you feel is fear. Fear is an emotion. Now you can separate your feelings and your feelings and your observations. Now you're starting to get into stage 4 systematicity, where what is happening inside their head is a sacred space. It's not sacred, but like there is a separate division in stage 4 between the things happening in my head and the things happening in your head. Your principles, projects, and commitments are not the same thing as mine. In stage 3, that's really tough to handle. You have to be into the same things. You have to be feeling the same feelings. Thank you. Cancel. Get this. You have to be feeling the same things and thinking, having the same interests. And now you're like, no, they're going to go out to the bar with the guys, and I'm not interested in that. And I'm going to go to my thing, and it's a separate thing. You know what I mean? So now in conflict resolution, you can say, my feelings are not the same thing as a thing that's happening in your head where you're accusing me. And somebody says to me, Matt, I feel accused, I feel rejected, I feel verbed, whatever the verb may be. And I can say, let's find an emotion behind that. And again, this might not be the best way to do nonviolent communication, but the ability to separate out what's happening in my head is a fact about the world outside of your head. It's not an emotion that's taking place inside your head. This is a stage 4 division. And the more you train yourself in those two formulas of turning your just, your empath thing from the meaning of the addict 4 into just a fact about another person. And now it is a question. When you do this, does it mean that you X? Right? Now you're setting up, I'm going to switch into my I am thou person. I'm going to turn into a person who uses the word thou for a moment. There is a thou and there is a me. We're not the same blending into each other. Now, stage 5, you also realize that you do blend into each other a ton. But you still have, there is a them, there is a you, but you do have some places where I have kind of turned into it's kind of like a person has a dog and then the dog and the owner look the same. Over time, you kind of pick up other people and they pick up you. So yeah, there's some blend there. But there is such a thing as you and me, and they're not the same, and conflicts actually get resolved way better through what you might think of as a system. Now, I actually had, for a long time, I was using nonviolent communication, and it started to break down, and I had to get metasystematic. It's an entirely long story, which I won't get into for the sake of time. But the point is to get metasystematic and ask why. How can I actually recombine systems, take a bit from this and take a bit from that based on what the situation calls for? Yes.
So what stage is first principles thinking?
Can you explain what first principles thinking is?
It's kind of like just, I guess it's like in every situation, you kind of, or like whenever you're doing something, you ask why, try to find like good explanations behind, like whatever, like what, like why are you acting a certain way in a situation? And just kind of trying to understand the reasons behind it.
That most of the words in what you just said are stage 4 words and stage 5, and all the further stages, they are not stage 3 words. Reasons are not stage 3. If, because, therefore, those are stage 4, where at stage 3, you are your social relationships, and you are your group, and you do what the group wants you to do. You'll often find yourself going to things because somebody else went to it.
In stage 3, the implicit reason is there's always an implicit reason, which is just because the group. Is
Right.
that okay?
Because it's so simple at that point. Like, sure, there are reasons, but you're not operating structurally at the level of finding and interpreting what's going on in the situation through, let's say, oh, and this is very important, why has multiple meanings. Why is in what cause, or why is in what motivated justification.
Right.
Right.
I wonder, Matt, if you think that the claim that there always are reasons implicit, quote unquote, in stage 3 is a kind of stage 4 conceptualization of stage 3. This is like an ongoing sort of beef I have with co-rationalists, is this idea that there's always a kind of implicit propositional content going on, in every different way of making meaning. And it occurs to me that like that sort of graphs it sort of it takes stage 4 for granted, a stage 4 way of thinking about it for granted, and then applies it, sort of graphs it back in the chain. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, as if it sounds like what you're saying, if that's true, then it would be a claim. It would be a claim that all people, all the way back to infancy, are all, or like even in stage 3, are always working out an explicit, formalized, you might say mathematical, not mathematical, but like formal, abstract, unusual mental model.
Yes,
I- I-
the critical rationalist. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think the distinction you just made, Matt, between causal descriptive reasons and internal justificationist reasons is the relevant distinction. Right? So it's not as though babies, there's not a causal description to be given of what they're doing, but that's different than their reasoning internally that leads to the behavior. And sometimes those two things can get conflated. You know?
Why did somebody want to do something? And why did the pool ball go across the table and
Right.
was hit by another pool ball?
Right, and those, yeah, exactly. Those two things are different.
It can be, even when those two things start to blend into each other, that it can be fruitful to try to figure out which one you're talking about, and if, or in the case where they're blending into each other a lot, to recognize that they're doing so.
Yeah.
No, like
well,
everything that I want and all of my wants are actually caused by pool balls. There's an example, you know, like it's atoms hitting other atoms and electrochemicals at some level of explanation is also true, right? But when you say like nobody has a mental model where they figure out the math of how to learn a bicycle, or figure out the math of the physics of the ball that they throw for another person to catch the ball, you know? Would that make sense?
So yeah, exactly. But so part of what to try to bridge it with the critical rationalist thing. So the critical rationalist description of how somebody would, you know, catch the baseball is that there is an implicit reasoning going on there that has the structure of epistemology, which in the critical rationalist view is this conjecture and criticism thing, where conjectures are understood to be these kind of propositions about the world that are representational and that you criticize. It's just that that's going on at a kind of implicit unconscious level. And to me, that's taking the stage 4 philosophical conception of justification. I know that justification is like a trigger word here, but stage 4 philosophical conception of what the explanation is for what's going on there, rather than a causal explanation, which, as you say, it's not a matter of doing the formal computation, even implicitly. It's a different way of solving that problem.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
It's like, yeah, and anybody else who wants to jump in, please do. Because I apologize if I've said any trigger words that I didn't know about. But this is one of the reasons I actually am really excited to be here. I don't know a lot about Deutsch or critical rationalism, but all of the ways in which this can bridge in and actually criticize or correct the ideas of Robert Kegan, for example, are very interesting to me. Or even not even criticize and correct, but also like find its incomplete and expand on it is incredibly fascinating to me.
Matt,
I keep finding myself wanting to make connections that are maybe facile or spurious, like what if evolution is a way of coming up with the creativity of all this life? You want to call that a definition of the word creativity, but at no point did evolution have her own research diagram, or like consciously plot out, let's see, teleologically, I want to end up at an endpoint of, right?
But 5 minutes, by the way.
5 minutes. Any other questions? Yes.
What does developmental regression look like in this model? You used a river as the metaphor, but I wonder, like you talk about stuckness between stages.
Yeah.
Can the obvious one seems to be like maybe trauma can set someone back, but I wonder about other yeah, what would that look like?
It's funny because there was so little discussion of backwards movement to regress to previous stages. Once you've entered a level of complexity at which the mind is structured, that it actually is like you can't become like biologically an infant, and you have trouble, like you're having trouble with just things in general through trauma. And forgive me if I'm speaking way out of my depth here, But there was no mention of like, you then regress, although the demand is there frequently. Kegan frequently said, people will demand that you must get back to stage 3. The problem is, even when you try to fake it or LARP it,
Stage 4, right?
you've lost the capacity to not have the capacities you have.
Keep it back to the shit.
Right.
So,
More so you can't take the blue pill.
Right. So even when you do it, you're just doing the thing that you're asked to do, but you're not being the thing that you're asked to be. You're just
The meme that comes to mind is coping, and that's
Coping.
another
It's a
form.
cope.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a full form of like, yeah, choosing to regress. Okay.
right, which you can do, but you're doing it for stage 4 reasons, stage 5 reasons, or whatever they may be. Because this is a way of structuring the self and what you actually are. Yeah, Jake.
Are you doing so stage, say you find yourself in a having a kind of trauma response, or like, you know, you're in wartime or something like that, and you know, you sort of you regress, so to speak, to down like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and find yourself behaving in a, say, stage 2 selfish way. Is that actually a matter of doing so for stage 4 reasons in every case, or are there other senses in which one could regress without it? I mean, I get that you haven't permanently lost the capacity, were circumstances to change, but I don't think if you necessarily ask that person, they would always have a stage 4 justification at hand
Yeah,
for why they're doing it.
yeah, amnesia, I mean, if it's physical trauma, they just forget the last 2 years, and they go back to their high school self, you know?
The way I would put it is that sometimes regressing might be a defensive mechanism to trauma. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
And the question is, are you regressing through cognitive stage?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Because it's not the cognitive stage that you're regressing through. Maybe you'll regress through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's a different framework. Which also reminds me to bring up one final point in conclusion, which is that this is a model, and Kegan himself will tell you, it is just a model, and Kegan's framework itself could be this. And everything that Hazard talked about could be this. And they're both actually true in certain situations or for certain purposes. A frame through, or Jake, should I use the phrase frame problem? Is it okay if I say frame problem?
I don't own that phrase, man. You could use it however you'd like.
Oh, okay. The frame you're using might be appropriate for this or that, but
This is what I jokingly meant by the rationality stage 6. Is that basically?
right. So Kegan emphasizes, look, I've come up with this and it's super useful, but useful is not like it came down from the clouds in a beam of light. So always think like outside of that as the framework is a tool. That's all I have to say in 50 minutes. So thank you very much for